Hey everyone, it's Jinx and I'm a Genshin Impact math guy now. So yeah, I'm back. I'm not really at 100% yet, closer to maybe 30 or 40%, but I am feeling functional enough to start producing videos again. So the first part of this video is going to be a brief explanation of what has been going on over the past month, but if all you really care about are my thoughts on the 1.3 things we haven't covered yet, then timestamps are on the screen. But before we get into all of that, don't forget that Tuner does stream almost every single day over on Twitch. I sometimes hang out in VC with him, and it's the best place to go to get a daily dose of us. Alright, so let's talk about why I was gone for so long. I have covered some of what's been going on over my personal Twitter, on the @JinxMathalos, as well as on the community post here on the YouTube channel. These are the two best places to get more frequent update on what's going on, since I can't always make a video explaining what's been happening. Basically, over the last month or so, I have been having some very extreme exhaustion, heavy mental fog, scrambled thoughts to almost an incoherent level, and respiratory symptoms like winding myself doing very simple tasks. And by extreme exhaustion, I mean that I struggle to stand up for more than a minute at a time. Fortunately, it was not COVID. I've had numerous rapid PCR as well as an antibody test, and so far they've all come back negative. I was checked out by my regular doc, and I did also have a brief ER stay. They were not able to pin down an exact diagnosis. However, a combination of rest, catching up on a huge sleep deficit I had, aggressive medication management, and dietary adjustments over this past month have helped my physical symptoms a lot. I also spent 2 weeks in IOP, which stands for Intensive Outpatient, to get my meds adjusted properly and my head straight so I could be more functional. For those not familiar with it, IOP is essentially a half day of therapy at a psychiatric hospital 5 days a week. I do have a very unhealthy relationship with work and pressure myself way too much. Even when I work for 50 to 60 hours a week, I still don't feel like I've done enough in the week, and I fall into a cycle of self-guilt, self-pressure, and depression. This is even worse when I don't get work done during the week, even if I am physically unable to do so like I have been. The 2 weeks of IOP have helped me get stable, but I am of course still working on all of these things with my regular therapist. However, it is a long process to reprogram my brain after spending my whole life practicing very unhealthy coping mechanisms and bad habits. Alright, that about covers what's been going on. I am trying to ease myself back into producing videos again. At the moment, I am aiming to get about 1 video done per week so as to not fall back into my bad habits. As I get more comfortable with that, I'll start working into making more videos per week. Alright, now let's talk about the 1.3 things we never got around to making videos about. So first off, my brief thoughts on our favorite Anemo Razor, Xiao. I am only going to be giving my general thoughts on him. If you want to see more in-depth analysis and math on him, I recommend checking out either Shadowblade or Pitfalls channels. They are both theory crafters I trust and can vouch for, and they also have several great videos already covering Xiao and the math behind him. The theory crafters at Kachingmains also put together a fantastic Xiao guide, so I recommend you check that out as well. Link to all of these things are in the description. Kachingmains also has a new fancy website, and they are in the process of transferring everything from the theory crafting library over to the new website, so be sure to go check that out at kachingmains.com. The TLDR is that Xiao is a very balanced, selfish, win-harder carry that requires hyper-investment to function competitively. Now, Xiao is selfish because you cannot switch off of him while his ult is active, and this can actively hurt your support's DPS output. However, this does become less of a problem if you run a hyper-carry team that just focuses on amping and enabling his damage. This is very similar to how a Diluc Vape team would work, for example, Xingqiu, Sucrose, and Bennett, where every one of the supports exists to enable your carry's damage. Speaking of Diluc Vape, I say Xiao is a win-harder carry because if you can wipe the content you're fighting into Xiao ults, then he is at Diluc Vape level single target output, aka very high and competitive ceiling of damage. And we'll discuss in a second why this 2 ult breakpoint is so important for Xiao. He also has a very strong AoE output with his plunge spams that can lead to him feeling stronger than, say, a Diluc Vape team. A Diluc Vape team is able to consolidate its AoE on multiple enemies at once, but it is much harder to do so because the AoE is much smaller on Diluc's Claymore attacks. In other words, Xiao is just easier to make sure you're damaging all the enemies at once than it is with Diluc, but it isn't necessarily better at it. Alright, now let's briefly talk about his issues, because honestly all of YouTube has already done a great job of overemphasizing and overhyping his power level. Honestly, out of all the units that have been released, I'm pretty sure Xiao is the most overhyped unit. And I say overhyped because Xiao's ceiling is very high, but most of the hype content around Xiao only show his strongest situations and ignore his pitfalls. He is a strong carry, and in my opinion, he is very balanced, but he is not a power level outlier like Diluc, Ganyu, or Venti. Because his power level comes with caveats and because of all of his issues, I consider him balanced. So the biggest issue with Xiao is that he has very strong energy recharge and energy management issues. This is why 2 Ult Xiao can be so strong, because he can ignore running an ER Sands for an attack Sands and can run very little ER and substats. It is important to note that Xiao only competes with Diluc Vape if he has an attack Sands. Now, the reason why this 2 Ult breakpoint is so important is because your first ult is free, and then your second ult gets twice as many particles as the third or later ult gets. This is because your second ult gets the particles from your first 2 E's as well as the second 2 E's after your first ult is over. Combined with any HP particles you should be getting from the first ult in a 2 ult clear, you generally don't have any energy issues on Xiao as long as you're hitting this 2 ult breakpoint. Now, if you have attack sense on your Xiao, this allows him to compete for the top 3 carries in the game slot alongside Diluc and Ganyu, but only if your investment is high enough to get a 2 ult clear. If you have to drop an attack sense for ER, or if you have to run a Fav Lance instead of a higher damage weapon, you do start to fall behind these two. And if you cannot wipe in those 2 ults, you have such strong ult uptime issues, you start really falling behind in power level. See, for most other teams, if you need 3 ults to clear, you're around maybe a 50% higher clear time than a 2 ult clear, pretty much a linear curve. But with Xiao, if you need a 3 ult clear, you can realistically double the clear time it takes for a 2 ult clear just because your third ult takes so long to generate. So yeah, Xiao is a very win harder carry. Also, a big issue I really have with Xiao personally is that he feels incredibly immobile if you play him correctly. See, his E gives him some really nice mobility. The problem is you basically never want to use your E during your ult unless you have Con 6 or you're running something like a Thunder Fury 4 meme build. This is because any of Xiao's E's during his ult do not generate any energy particles. So this means you're losing an entire E's worth of energy particles, which means you can add up to 10 seconds to your run anytime you E during his ult. On top of that, his high jumps have pretty low horizontal movement even at max heights, so you don't move that far on top of losing animation time that costs you damage. This on top of the fact that his high jumps do make you lose sight of the battlefield, so it's harder to position, it's hard to keep track of enemies. All of this combined with his very heavy animation commitments due to how long his combos actually take do contribute to the last of his pitfalls. He just eats a lot. Now, you can dodge hits by timing your jumps and plunges correctly, but again, this costs you animation time, which lowers his DPS. See, his frame perfect high plunge spams take over a second to animate, during which you cannot dodge. On top of that, he drains his own health, so he can't really tank that many hits. On top of that, when you get hit mid-air, it takes longer to recover from the hits, so you're losing about 1 of your plunge spams per ult anytime you get hit. And if you get low enough, which is realistically only a few hits, then you have to end your ult early to switch to an emergency healer. This really hurts his clear times because it takes you closer to not hitting that 2 ult clear that he needs to really shine. So yeah, Xiao does have a lot of issues, but if you can overcome these issues, he is competing for one of the top carries in the game. And I think this is honestly a good thing. Diluc and Ganyu, even at Constellation 0, are outliers. They're about 20% or more higher in power level than their direct competitors. On top of that, Diluc's arguably the easiest carry in the game to play, and Ganyu gets permafreeze. So the fact that Ganyu can compete with them in an ideal situation is a really good thing for his power level, but the fact that he has all these issues puts him in a very balanced state. Now, it is unfortunately too late to decide if you want to pull or skip Xiao. I do apologize for not being able to put out a video during the time he was actually on banner, but for those of you who did choose to pull for him, let's just briefly talk about building your Xiao. First off, your Xiao at minimum should be Ascension 6, level 80 out of 90. He is the definition of a hyper carry. Now, thanks to newer resin investment math done by another theory crafter, Makarov, linked to his Reddit post covering the subject in the description, it is now known that hyper carries like Xiao, Ganyu, Diluc, Klee, and Razor should be invested to Ascension 6 level 80 out of 90 with as high a talents as you can bring them in their important talents before you invest in your supports. Basically, these units deal enough of a percentage of your damage that they warrant investing in before you invest in your supports to this almost capped level. Other carries like Ningguang and such do deal less of their team's total percent of damage. They're not really quite hyper carries, so they should be stopping at Ascension 5 Talent 8s. This is one tier higher than what we originally thought carries should be stopping at, which is Ascension 4 Talent level 6. I have already covered these calcs before in a long tweet chain over on my personal Twitter. I recommend checking that out if you want to learn more about the math behind that before I manage to make a video about it. Like everything else, link in the description to that tweet. I do want to very importantly note that you should do as I say, not as I do. Even though my hyper carries should be at Ascension 6, I am not currently investing past Ascension 4 at the moment because I cannot uninvest my units. If I were to bring my Ganyu or my Diluc up to Ascension 6, it would ruin them for playtesting different compositions if I would use them as supports in a swap comp. However, I have pretty cracked artifact substats, so I can simulate what an Ascension 6 unit's damage is with average artifacts because my artifacts are strong enough to make up that difference. On top of that, I'm only getting 1 minute to sub 40 halves of Abyss 12-3, so I don't really need to invest more in my teams right now, so I'm preferring to spread it out so I can do more testing. As for talents, Xiao's normal attack talent should be as high a level as you can possibly make it with the weekly boss mats you have available. Your E only needs to be talent level 6 unless you're running a Constellation 6 Xiao because of the fact that it's such a low percentage of his total damage output. As for his ult, talent 6 or 7 is as high as it needs to go. See, the damage bonus you get from his ult is an additive total modifier just like an Anemo damage bonus on his cup or Viridescent Vanilla 2-piece. This means if you have a plus 20 Anemo cup and a talent level 7 ult, you're only getting a 2% damage increase over a talent 6 ult. The only reason we say talent 7 is a nice stopping point if you've already gotten your talent on normal attack as high as you possibly can is because it does lower the amount of health drain you take per second. Now, the fact that you only need to level 1 talent past 6 for Xiao is actually a massive advantage over Diluc and Ganyu. Diluc does definitely want his normal attack leveled up before anything else, however his E and his Q are still a good portion of his total DPS rotation, so he does want everything leveled up as high as he can. And Ganyu still wants her normal attack and her ult leveled past 6, her E doesn't really need it though. Gear-wise, Xiao does care the least about set bonuses in the game because they are additive with the damage bonus he gets from his ults. So if we look at this chart again, we can see we're getting sub 7% damage increases from adding the 15% additive bonus from Viridescent Vanilla 2 set into our set. Now 7% isn't anything to shake at, but it is going to be possibly lower than just running good substat pieces on him instead. A handful of crit damage or crit rate substats on Xiao's set will make up this 7% difference. Now his ideal set is 2 Viridescent Vanilla with 2 Glad, but that's only if you can fit in enough substats on those set bonus pieces to make it worth running over just random crap with your highest substats. This is why my set for Xiao only runs 2 Viridescent Vanilla and not 2 Glad, because these substats on my offset pieces simply total to more damage bonus than running 2-piece Glad. Now, because his Anemo cup is additive with his ult buff, so you do start hitting diminishing returns, you can run an attack percent cup. However, this is still going to be slightly lower on average a damage gain than running an Anemo cup. But we're talking like sub 1% difference, so really you run whichever one has the better substats. Keep in mind, if you have outside sources of attack percent like Bennett, Noblesse Oblige 4-piece supports, or R5 Dragon Slayers, or Wolf Gravestone, then attack percent does fall even further behind Anemo percent. However, also keep in mind that if you run an ER Sans, then attack percent starts to take the lead over Anemo percent. Because of how it depends all of Xiao's sets, including his cup or his set bonus choices or running no set bonuses at all, I would recommend just punching your gear into Shadowblade's calculator. Just compare your sets and see which gives you the biggest number basically. As for weapons, again, it still depends on substats and other gear. But generally speaking, Jade Spear is basically equal to Homa, which are both greater than Deathmatch, and Blackcliff, which are basically equal to each other depending on substats. Fav is not that far behind Deathmatch or Blackcliff because it has a Type 44 base attack, which is very good. Honestly, even though it does lower his ceiling on damage a bit, I would generally recommend using a Fav Lance on Xiao if you don't have 5-star weapons, because the difference isn't that big between that and the other 4-star options. And running 5 Lance does make your Xiao much more flexible team comp wise and gives you a much bigger margin of error from messing up your energy management. However, if you can hit those 2 ult wipes with Deathmatch or Blackcliff, they will clear faster than 5 Lance. As for the power level of his constellations, TLDR, he's basically a con 6 or bust unit because his cons 1 through 5 aren't very great, but I do recommend checking out Shadowblade's video on the subject. As for Xiao combos, I'm not going to get into all of that because that's a very long video in of itself. Speaking of a very long video on combos, Kleeful already has one that's fantastic and you should just go check out. He covers all of the combos, when they are strong, when you should use them, how to do them, which ones reach the Luke Vape level tier, which do not. It's just a great video, go check it out. Alright, let's briefly cover Zhong Li next and his buffs in 1.3 and what I think of them. Originally, I thought he was going to be Venti tier, but I am backpedaling a bit on that now. He's definitely an S tier support, but he's not quite Venti Michael Phelps level. Really, the big power spike he got is his 20% universal resistance shred, which is a broken mechanic. Most enemies' resistances start at about 10%, which is a 16.7% damage gain from getting this 20% resistance shred. And this damage gain gets even higher if they start with more than 10% resistances. This basically means that if your Zhong Li has a shield up and you just stick him in any team, your whole team's doing about 16.7% more damage. And having a stronger shield is nice, however, because his resistance shred is so broken, you don't want the shield to break. So unless your Zhong Li is very hyper invested, you still have to dodge attacks to make sure his shield doesn't break. His E also still really messes up reaction teams, and in my opinion, his charge E placing a pillar actually means you have to play very carefully to make sure your E isn't messing up and eating reactions. And compared to a VV4 support who has the 40% resistance shred on an element they swirl, Zhong Li is generally going to be better in reaction teams. This is because VV4 is a pain to manage the correct elemental swirling on in a reaction team. If you've ever tried keeping a Sucrose's VV4 resistance shred on Pyro in a Diluc Vape team after the first rotation, it's a nightmare to maintain. Overall, Zhong Li still has pretty much his same issues, he's just a lot stronger now. Just the same as he was at launch, he scales very well with your team's whole investments. And if he is very hyper invested, he does very well as a support. And he's an even better Crescent Pike carry than he used to be. But if your Zhong Li doesn't have a high level investment and your team isn't a high level, then he can feel pretty lackluster still. As your units level up, they gain more defense, and also Zhong Li gains more HP as he levels up, which makes his shield even stronger. As a baseline example, if we look at Zhong Li at level 90 out of 90 versus level 60 out of 70, between his higher damage resistance from having a higher level of defense, as well as having more shield HP because he has more base HP for the scale off of, against a level 100 enemy, a level 90 Zhong Li shield is going to be about 30 to 40% tougher. This increased defense on your units from levels is why level 90 teams seem to get hit a lot less hard compared to level 60 or 70 teams. Also, a tougher shield means you get to have the resistance shred for longer compared to lower level teams. On top of that, because Zhong Li has HP scaling and you get a lot of HP per level, he does scale very well with investment. But if your Zhong Li is not very heavily invested, he can feel very lackluster. Now, Zhong Li's ult is not bad, but other than the crowd control it brings, it doesn't really bring any kind of enabling, it's just damage. It's not bad damage, but in some cases using it can just be a DPS loss because of how long the animation time is on it. For example, my Diluc Vape or Ganyu teams have more investment on my Diluc and Ganyu than on my Zhong Li. And if I use my Zhong Li's ult, it is less damage than just giving that field time to my Diluc or my Ganyu. Which is why I almost never use Zhong Li's ults on those teams because he just exists for resistance shred. All of these really make Zhong Li want to have a high level investment to really shine as a support in these kinds of teams. I've actually been running Instructor's Forset a lot on him lately in my reaction teams because it gives him an additional piece of utility whenever he pops his charge E shield. Now, by comparison, Venti with either high or low investment provides a lot more as a support. High investment Venti just does a lot more damage than Zhong Li, and low investment Venti still has a Descent Venera 4-piece set of resistance shred, he still clusters enemies, and he funds a ton of energy onto the team. By contrast, a Zhong Li without a Fav Lance can produce a fairly large energy deficit because because his E is really bad at generating energy, and in reaction teams you don't even really want it to be hitting anything. That being said, Favlance does live on my Zhong Li, and also Homa is very good on him if you have one. So yeah, Zhong Li isn't really Venti level support like I initially thought, but he is still definitely a high tier support and does scale really nicely with investment. Alright, next up, let's just talk briefly about Homa. So Homa is a good weapon. It's basically on par with Jade Spear for Xiao, and which is better just depends on your substats as well as how good you are at maintaining either of their passives. And even with substat variations, we're talking like single percents of damage difference, so really just run whichever one you are more comfortable keeping the passive up on. And if you're really curious which one ekes out a little bit more DPS, then just use Shadow Blaze Xiao calculator for that. Now, as I mentioned before, Homa is definitely best in slot for Zhong Li unless you're running Favlance, and it will most likely be best in slot for Hu Tao because her E scales with max HP. As for the new Lithic weapons, well, I haven't done any math on them personally yet, but from what I've heard, they need multiple refinements as well as around 3 or higher leeway units on your team to be beating things like Deathmatch or Serpent Spine, which are both basically general best in slot choices for 4-star weapons for either claymores or spears. That being said, if you can get multiple refinements on them and you can run the correct teams with them, they can be very strong. The only problem is that the only leeway healer right now is Chi-Chi, and Chi-Chi is not really considered competitive with Bennett, Jean, or Diona as a healer slot. As for the new Abyss, I find it incredibly fun. I will say that the new 12 is probably my favorite floor 12 we've ever had. It's the only one that doesn't require specific countering mechanics like countering for 2Es or having a shield break mechanic in your team. This frees up your team comps a lot, which means you can run basically anything and do well in this current floor 12 of the Abyss, with the exception of Geo teams kind of getting screwed in Chamber 1. I personally have not found this a harder floor 12 to 9-star than previous floor 12s. In fact, it's arguably easier because I don't have to hamstring my team compositions to have counter mechanics. Pretty much all of the teams I've been testing can 9-star no problem, and many of my teams are clearing 12-3 first half in 45 to 35 seconds. And as you know, I don't use my 5-star weapons, I use my 5-star constellations, and I don't invest in my units past Ascension 5 right now, although with my cracked substats and artifacts, they're basically hitting the same as an A6 unit. I do use my 4-star constellations. Unfortunately, I cannot turn them off for testing, but I do keep my Bennett at Constellation 1 and my Jingqiu at Constellation 5 because otherwise I mess up testing. However, even though I don't find this new floor 12 harder to 9-star than previous ones, if you could not already 9-star previous Abysses, you might actually struggle on this one. Mostly because every single chamber has a 3-minute limit for a 3-star now. The previous floor 12s gave you 5 minutes for you to clear chamber 1 and 2, meaning that you basically got 6 stars for free if you could at least 1 or 2-star floor 12-3. But now basically every chamber in floor 12 is about as tight as previous floor 12-3s, so it is definitely going to be harder if you weren't already hitting those DPS requirements. 12-1 is probably most players' wall because it's the most mechanically challenging. It is the easiest one to get killed in, and if you are not solid at dodging, it can definitely be a struggle. I definitely recommend bringing some kind of shielder like a Zhongli or Diona on your teams if you're struggling, just so you can have a bit more margin for error. As for the Lantern Rite event, it was cool. I definitely enjoyed the lore in it, and theater mechanics was very fun, and I do hope that they bring that back around, maybe as a permanent game mode or at least for other events. Honestly, not that much more to say about the Lantern Rite event though. Free resources are nice, more content to play through is nice because I do genuinely really enjoy the core gameplay loop of this game, so any excuse I have to do more of that I enjoy. Not to mention getting a free leeway unit is really nice, especially because Jingqiu is one of them and he's just kind of a busted 4-star. As for the future, I plan to stream Hu Tao testing tomorrow when she comes out. I'll be doing my standard day 1 testing on her. I have a long list of things to test day 1 from the theory crafters at Kaching mains, and I will be joined in voice chat with Cleeful. I've already mentioned them before in this video because they have great Xiao videos you should definitely go check out, and I think it'll be interesting having him join me in day 1 testing. Now, I'm still not feeling that great, so I don't want to commit to more than 1 to 2 videos a week for the foreseeable future, at least while I'm still getting back into the swing of things. Okay, that's it for this video. It did end up quite a bit longer than I expected for some brief covering of things, but there was a lot of 1.3 stuff I didn't get to talk about yet. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, leave a comment below letting us know what you think, and share it with your friends. All 3 of these things are the best way for you to help support us completely for free. And don't forget, Tuner does stream live on Twitch almost every single day. It's a great way to get a daily dose of interaction with us. And don't forget to check out our Twitters. The @JinxMathlos is my personal Twitter, and then the @JinxTuner is the company account run by Tuner. Outside of the full YouTube videos though, I do post about basically everything I'm currently testing or theory crafting over on my Twitter in really long tweet chains. Over the past few weeks, I've tweeted about my Floor 12 testing, about official turbo comps, the new resin efficiency math, and just a whole bunch of stuff. We do also have our Discord server, the Mathalos Nest. Be sure to come hang out if you're looking for people to co-op with, or you're looking to have people to theorycraft with. And of course, none of this would be possible without the generosity of our patrons. And as this is the first video of the month, time for a full Patreon call out. So a huge thank you to Yoshi Cho, David Sternberg, Laydell Wilson, Birdlord, Aaron Fakar, Ken NG, and Unholy Mess, Aaron Porter, Robert Dotes, Fivetail, Paul Scott, Paul Gar, Nilesh Jagnik, Zethrion, Rathion, LH, Davey Sawatsky, Tito Bobito, Starlord 1845, Lunar Lee, 0412, Dive 2 World, Stormtag, Vorpal Prybar, Sweet Daddy, Lord K2, Scott Dobros, Kumiko, Alan Odom, Skylar Yang, and every single one of you who supports us over on Patreon. It really does mean a lot, especially if you continue to keep supporting us even when we have months like this where I'm just not physically well enough to make any video content for you guys. I say it every video and I will say it again in every new video, y'all the best. Alright, I am very tired, so I'm gonna go lie down now and relax. Thanks so much for joining us as always. I'm gonna go rest up for the Hu Tao stream tomorrow. So be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, that way YouTube will let you know as soon as things come out, such as the Hu Tao stream. Happy waifu hunting whalers, we'll see you next time. Bye!